Hello, Dr. Arezou Ghane. Welcome to the Matriarch podcast. As you know, Matriarch is about creating wealth and well-being for women. We're going to dive deep about you and your practice and all the work that you've been doing. Thank you for coming. It's really a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Patricia. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Of course, I think about having more than enough financial well-being, but I also consider wealth in a number of different ways, including psychological, social well-being, physical well-being. So that's how I like to think about it, is a little bit more outside of the box, I guess.
What do you do for your own well-being? Do you have a good routine every morning? What do you do?
Yes, I do have some practices. I dedicate my Sunday nights to meal prepping. I think cooking food and shopping local, organic, fresh ingredients is where I like to start to feed myself and my family. And I teach yoga and meditation, so I also practice yoga and meditation. Although I'll say this with a caveat that upon becoming a mother, it's a little less consistent for me. I get it where I can. And my most consistent practice as of right now is probably dancing. I love to dance. It's like the source of my joy and instant mood shift. So I try to dance every day.
What kind of dance?
I've been trained in the lineage of Afro-Brazilian dance for the last probably 13 years or so. It's super fun, super joyful, but really any of the dances that come from the African diaspora are really just like full of power and energy and joy. And I've also been kind of dipping back into a little bit of my own cultural dance. I'm Iranian American. I was born in Iran. So learning a little bit more of those roots as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Brazil, so this is really cool.
Amazing.
I'm Japanese Brazilian. My grandparents are Japanese, but I was born in Brazil and I was raised in Brazil.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I live in the States now, but yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So that's cool. Like you do Afro-Brazilian music, you dance to it.
Yeah. It's been such a gift in my life. I've had such an academic, like screen heavy life, and then to be able to just let it all go and be free.
Well, Dr. Ghane, you are a psychologist with a PhD in health psychology. Tell me a little bit what that means and why did you decide to go into this field?
Yes. So in health psychology, we look at some of the same types of topics that we would examine in medicine, but we look at it from the perspective of this more multidimensional view, where in medicine, we really rely mostly on the sort of biomedical explanation for what people are experiencing. In health psychology, we think about the psychological, sociological, and behavioral factors as well. And also environment, right? And I had some time working more in the sort of traditional clinical path, but I really was drawn to health psychology because of its focus on the positive aspects of human behavior and, health, well-being, flourishing, rather than just focusing on the pathological lens, to really think about like what is possible in the way that human life can play out and how can we predict the best outcomes for people.
I like that angle. The name of your practice is Auteur Health and Wellness. Why did you choose this name?
So the name Auteur, I drew it from actually film theory. In film theory, there's this idea that when you're watching certain directors and you know specifically their imprint, they can take really any story and make it their own. For example, the story of Pinocchio was recently retold by Guillermo del Toro. And in watching the film, the way he tells it, you can tell it's almost like his story. It becomes that. And so this for me was a really beautiful metaphor for the possibility of this work that I do as a coach, where we can't quite control life outcomes as they happen. Losses, changes, all of these things, aging, we're subject to a series of uncontrollable events, but we can absolutely control the way that we tell the story and the way that we respond, and that we can actually own this story and make it belong to us in this way. So that was just my throwback to the idea of that this is even possible.
That's a very nice name. You talk a lot about flourishing in your practice as the foundation of your work. Our culture is obsessed with productivity, with self optimization. So, what does real flourishing and abundance look like for women? Because we obviously have a very different set of societal expectations and to do lists and things like that. What, in your opinion, constitutes flourishing and abundance for women?
Yeah, this concept of productivity and self-optimization, it's all connected to this concept that we call hedonic adaptation in social psychology. And it's this phenomenon that we tell ourselves, I'll be happy when maybe I reach a certain number on the scale, or I'll be happy when I have a certain figure income, or I have these accomplishments, I've written these books, whatever it may be for yourself. And the reality that we find in the research is that we're really good at adapting. No matter what happens, what big achievements we get, what big milestones we hit, we become used to it. And so to me, flourishing, true flourishing for women and men, really both alike, have to do more with this idea of mindful presence, being able to be in our lives, being able to enjoy and savor the experiences that are here. The possibility of having a meaningful life or creating meaning in our life and creating connections, relationships that nurture and feed us. And then another concept that is drawn from a developmental theorist, Erik Erikson, is this idea of generativity. And he proposed that this is really the goal of an adult life, well lived, is that, once we feel that our own personal well-being is taken care of and we have beautiful relationships around us, that then we move on to this next layer of actually thinking about what we can possibly contribute to the greater good. And that is all sort of encapsulated in this idea of flourishing for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then from your experience, because we talk about flourishing, and a lot of the times what stops us from flourishing is that a lot of us have a scarcity mindset. It shows up in women's lives, especially when it comes to time and money, worthiness, attention. How do you help women out of this mindset?
Yes. The scarcity mindset, I think, is very much related to a certain bias that we're all subject to, having human minds, that we call the negativity bias. And this is just the brain's adaptive pattern of noticing when things don't go well, right? Well, maybe when we fail, or, again, when we don't have enough of something, we have this feeling of almost like alarm that comes with that. But especially as women, we're so socialized to be oriented towards the external world, maintaining our relationships and projecting certain images and identities. So, even regardless of how successful a woman may be, she's always still being assessed for how she looks and all of these other, sort of external factors. And so really it's in recognizing that this is a reality that all of us are facing, that there are actually entire industries made off of making us feel like we're not enough, but having the ability to kind of rewrite the story for ourselves again. I think one powerful, simple practice that can be a game changer in shifting scarcity is the practice of gratitude, to really kind of sort of combat that negativity bias. What is actually going really right for you? What do you have? What are your skills and your strengths?
Right.
And really also self-love, self-care is such an important practice to have in our lives. And that can look any number of ways depending on the individual and the moment. But really it's in walking with people through this process and identifying what works best for them to help them activate this mindset of abundance and enoughness.
You also talk about how your approach is not about fixing people. It's just being with people, with the women that you help in the complexity of everybody's lives. So this is an important distinction because a lot of people, though, when they go to a therapist, they want their lives fixed, or they want therapists to fix their lives. This changes a lot of the conversation about self-care, doesn't it? And what you need to do for yourself versus what you're expecting other people to do it for you.
Yes, absolutely. I believe that all of the quote unquote mistakes or setbacks that we experience are actually our greatest lessons. And there's this concept that was first introduced to me by meditation teacher and psychologist Tara Brach of radical acceptance. And this is really just so revolutionary when we feel like we're no longer fighting our life and fighting what's here, that there's so much more possibility. And so I really like to encourage this perspective that, you know, we're not broken. Nobody is ever really broken, but we can be with these parts of our lives that feel maybe messy or chaotic or out of control without immediately needing to tidy it all up. And we can see what's here for us to learn and extract from these experiences. You know, it's very empowering in this way. As you said, it's no longer someone else's responsibility, but it's within your own ability to do that for yourself.
Yes. I mean, the whole self-care conversation, though, because it became such a commodity and sometimes it means nothing. So how do you define true wellness? And especially, you know, for people that are already taking care of other people, for people that are busy, we have high functioning women in our audience. So how do you define true wellness and how can you get that?
You know, you can look to a number of kind of markers of wellness, like what is your physical health, your bill of health, so to speak. But I also believe that true wellness is very subjective, and that a person knows when they feel well, when they feel sort of fully energized and alive and operating at full capacity versus not. So it is such a subjective thing to define for ourselves. But I think while it's so easy to check a box off and just say, you know, I got my massage or I took this class here and now I did my act of wellness for today. It really is for me such a muscle of just constantly being present to our lives, to how we feel in our bodies, to the quality of our relationships, and continue to flex that muscle in a way that feels really adaptive and responsive given whatever season of life we're in. I happen to walk with a dear person in my life as they're going through cancer treatment currently. And even though, you know, again, on paper, having cancer is not a state of wellness, but the way that this person has approached the process, it's amazing. And they've kind of just embraced so much of themselves and their lives and what they do have that, I mean, they were actually paraded around the hospital. The doctor was bragging, like, look at this person. They're going through chemo and they're actually just so radiant and so beautifully alive, undeniably so. So I think that's important to keep in mind. That we can kind of create that for ourselves regardless of the situation. And it's really just a matter of continually putting in that effort of carving out that space. I know it's hard for a lot of women who are just so full with obligations, but we really recognize that whether you're a leader or a mother or whatever role you play in the world, that you can only give so much as what you give to yourself first.
Yes, I agree. You mentioned that you don't coach like Tony Robbins, for example, that whole motivational style, which is very masculine, you know, somewhat aggressive in a good way, but it's somewhat aggressive. Can you speak to the power of the feminine, intuitive approach to growth and to what you do? Because it's very undervalued, I think, that kind of approach, isn't it? I think our society likes louder things.
Yes, we like loud, we like aggressive, we love the boot camp, we love the structure, we love a plan.
Right.
And,
Yep.
you know, again, it's almost like we want to check a box. We want to show up and we want to have somebody else tell us exactly what to do. But I truly believe that nobody else can do that for us, right? We're the authority of our own lives. And, think there's
no one is coming to save us.
Right. Yeah. I describe it as more feminine because to me it has a quality like water. And in the philosophy of Taoism, there's a concept of wu wei, which is the ability to align oneself with the current of life, however our life is moving, to go with that movement instead of opposing it. So, as women, especially, we are cyclical beings, but really all humans are cyclical and dynamic. We're constantly changing. Our biology is constantly changing. And so it doesn't really make sense to have this like full throttle approach to life every day, because there are moments in time where resting is needed. And even those times where it may feel like we're sort of dormant in our lives, that is also purposeful and meaningful. And neurologically, a lot of times where we have those open spaces where not much is going on, that's a time of integration. And that integration is really important for unlocking insight and creativity. So as maybe unsatisfying as it is for someone who's looking for a quick fix, I really think that this is a more sustainable way of approaching your well-being, is kind of just learning how to be with the ebbs and flows.
I mean, I have both of those philosophies in my head all the time. I know that when I go with the flow, things happen. And I know this intellectually, I know this in my body. But I also am constantly looking at things like, I need to be doing this and all of these people are doing that. Maybe I should, instead of resting, I was invited to this event and maybe that's good for my business. And we are bombarded with what seemingly is an opportunity. So maybe it's to go out, is to have dinner, to do, to be active. And it's really hard to know when to say no to things. It's hard to put boundaries now.
Yeah.
More than ever, I think, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yes. I feel like our minds are so crowded. And,
yes.
You and I met through Substack, and I was inspired to name my Substack Rehumanizing, because I think in the era that we live in, it's really important to avoid simply living by algorithm, whether it's determining how we dress or how we raise our families and, what kind of business decisions we make, whatever it is, even the scripts, the way that we speak is being shaped by these external forces. And in those moments, I think it's just so important to have more and more these days a practice of completely unplugging, and where needed, unsubscribing. If you notice that something is making you feel some kind of way, if you notice that someone is making you feel inadequate, even if you love them, you don't have to constantly have their feed in your mind. And really developing this practice of dropping in, of awakening what we call interoception, or this wisdom of your body from within.
Interoception?
Interoception. It's a unique feeling of being in your
Never
body.
heard of that term.
Yeah, it's one of our senses. So, we think about smell, sight, all of these different things, but that's also a sense that we have of like this unique feeling of being in your own body. Yeah. And I think it's important when we look at tech and we think about our relationship to tech, keeping in mind that in that world, our attention is the commodity, and that we are referred to as so-called users, right? Which is like what we refer to addicts. So it's okay to recognize that there are forces that are bigger than us that make it hard for us to resist this temptation to constantly be connected. There's actually really great neuroscience behind a lot of tech companies that's keeping us hooked. So it's okay to say, I've kind of lost control over here, and to reach out for help and support when we need it, whether that's an accountability group or, someone who you're working one-on-one with that can help you with that. But I think it's a really important skill to be able to call ourselves out in that way.
Yeah, you're right. I downloaded an app called Be Present to help me. And so I just put blocks of time that they just block Instagram, for example. I can't go in. I mean, of course I could if I disable. It's just more steps. But I find that it's been very helpful for me to keep focus. I've been more productive and more just quiet. So I was just talking to a friend the other day, and we are in midlife, and that's a huge transition. But life is a big transition, right? From the very early age, we're just constantly going through different transitions. We learn how to walk, then we separate from our parents and go to school, and then we marry, then we divorce, and then there's motherhood. So For women, though, especially because of midlife and because we are, like you were saying, we're like cyclical beings. What are the most common emotional and psychological blocks that women face during these transitions, and how can you help us get through them? If we're going through this big transition, no matter what, what's your suggestion for us to think about or to work on?
Yeah, I think a lot of the common themes that come up in working with women have to do with worthiness. Right? We're so used to looking outside of ourselves for validation,
Yes.
and also even just determining like next steps in our lives. Okay, I'm married. What now? I should have children, and a lot of times we're living by someone else's playbook.
Yes.
Similarly, I think learned helplessness as women, sometimes we're taught to sort of play small, and that can become a habit over time that can really hold us back.
Yes.
So, anytime we're thinking about these transitions or these evolutions, in a way, it's kind of a death that we're experiencing every time we're experiencing a death of a former version of
Mm.
ourselves. And that can be really scary. It can be really scary to let go of the past. But I believe that if you can have that sense of sort of faith that there's something bigger waiting for you, that there's something even meaningful in that loss, in that letting go of the past, that we have a tremendous opportunity to redefine ourselves. And when we go into this act
Mm.
with intention and with purpose, then we have the agency to kind of determine what the next chapter looks like. But when we spend all of our time sort of grieving what was or what wasn't, that, we can feel sort of stuck and almost victimized by these changes.
When we talk about worthiness for women, I always want to talk about money because I think women are so socialized also to not talk about money. We're embarrassed about it. Maybe the younger generations less so. And money is one form of energy. So, in your view, how can women start relating to money from a place of empowerment instead of fear or shame or how we've been socialized?
Yes. Yeah. I think the first step again is just in recognizing that this unworthiness narrative is something that may be present and that may have been handed to us
Hmm.
from society, from culture. So I like to think about money as a window that allows us to access what we most desire. And sometimes it can
Mm.
be kind of scary to even think about, like, what do I desire? How can I articulate that if I've never even been allowed to prioritize that, if I've always been so focused on what everyone else expects of me or wants from me? But I think it starts with really just articulating that for ourselves. What do we want? And can we allow ourselves
Mm.
to embrace that as a real possibility? For me, that underlying sense of desire is what allows me to have the strength and energy to go for the hustle, right? Otherwise, it's just sort of a meaningless pursuit. But when we can recognize
Yes.
it doesn't even have to be this sort of selfish gain of like, I want to acquire more and more and more. Sometimes maybe having more will allow me to give more. That can be a
Right.
huge motivator. And that happens all the time with people when they have families or they're taking care of someone else, that they have this sense of urgency in going after something because they know that they're doing tremendous good. So that for me is really
Yes.
important, is creating the meaning and the purpose behind it, thinking about our impact on our world, thinking about the legacy we want to leave behind.
Those are great tips as how we can reframe the pursuit of abundance, including money, right?
Mhm.
And so we want to normalize women talking about money. So when you were growing up, did your family talk about money at all openly? Was it a subject that you felt was openly discussed and you were guided to manage your money, or no?
I was trying to think back on if there's any explicit conversations I remember. I don't remember that. I do know that as an Iranian American immigrant, I was very much aware of this expectation that we're here in America to work hard, to achieve big things, and ultimately, hopefully, someday have that financial freedom. And I was also
Right.
raised by a single father. My mother passed away when I was 6. So I never really felt like we were
Mm.
missing a lot financially, but I did see my dad work so hard and hustle. And I watched him over the course of my life climb that social economic ladder, really kind of bringing to life that embodiment of the American dream. So while I don't really remember those explicit conversations about money, I know that it was something that was really valued and respected in my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think immigrant families, especially first generation, it's just really not too much about talking, but it's just working, right? It's just the work, 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 work. Are you a good negotiator? How do you handle like negotiations? Because I think that's another part too of women and self-worthiness, and also not sometimes feeling that we can take space or we can demand things, that we kind of cut ourselves short in negotiations. Are you a good one?
I am not very good at negotiating. I have to admit that I am still nervous and timid when it comes to those moments. But this is where I like to borrow from my world of performing as a dancer, which is I do something that I do on stage as well. I summon a persona. So even though for me personally, I
Uh-huh.
still feel shy stepping into those spaces and asking for what I want, I happen to have a handful of very confident white male colleagues. And I imagine what they might feel in the moment. Like, what would they say and how would they conduct themselves? And that's what I try to put on, like almost as a costume. I would also like to plug the book Likeable Badass. It's by Alison Fergali. She's a social psychologist, and she talks a lot about these issues around
Okay.
negotiation and asking for what you want, getting over these
Oh, good.
obstacles that we have. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'll read it for sure. Maybe I'll ask her to come into the pod. I mean, who knows, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That
She
would be
would love
great.
it.
And then, another question I wanted to give you is more of hypothetical, but if I gave you $1 billion today and you could only spend on one thing to solve a problem, what would that be?
Okay, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to do a hybrid. I'm going to do a hybrid cause. I want to go for environmental
Okay.
conservation paired with mental health.
Okay.
I know that,
All right.
we need wild spaces, right, for the balance of our planet in general. The rainforest, the coral reefs, the
Yes.
animals, the soil, everything is endangered. And that's really a detriment to ourselves as well. So I would like to give that money
Yes.
towards conservation and also to pair these wild spaces with transformational experiences with experts from all domains to create a shelter, a refuge that feels accessible for people who need it, whoever needs this deep reset. There's been a
Mm.
tremendous amount of research from Dr. Keltner and Craig Anderson on the science of awe. And we know that awe is incredible in combating symptoms of PTSD and other mental disorders, of helping our
Mm.
bodies fight inflammation. It's just really amazing what happens when people are put in these contexts of being in the natural world, being able to tune into the natural world, and just have a sense of really how small we are. So I know that in this world, we're getting
Mm.
so much more connected to tech, but I think it's going to be that much more important to invest in those relationships that we have with the living world. I truly believe that that's going to be our
Yes.
saving grace.
I 100% agree with you. And then to close, first of all, I want to say how lovely this conversation has been. And I learned so much and I got a lot of resources. And we're going to share this in the show notes and also with our newsletter subscribers of the books that you mentioned. And there's so many resources here in this conversation. I really appreciate that. But I wanted to close to see if you'd be willing to guide us through a short practice or maybe a prompt that can help us bring back to that space of abundance and self-connection. Maybe it's a prompt that people can think about in their day if that scarcity mindset is getting the best out of them, if they are having negative feelings, if they are going through life and thinking, God, nothing good is coming to me. Is there anything that you can help us with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's just so many forms of meditation and tremendous practices that we can call on in those moments. I like to reflect on these various time points in my life. So, starting with this imagination of the first kind of experiences we had as children, and really feeling those experiences in our body and thinking about who were we as children and what were the things that brought us joy? What are the things that gave us a sense of beauty, of hope, of awe, all of these feelings that we're trying so hard to kind of cultivate in our adult lives. Maybe recalling some of those instances, reliving some of those experiences. I like to do this as a meditation as well. And also tuning into those early experiences of being a child and feeling the difficult lessons, the hurt that we have, the heartbreak, the suffering that we experienced as young people. And then recalling, what of those experiences did we gain? What did they give us? And then taking that kind of memory along with us as we then project ourselves from where we are now 5 years into the future. To just allow ourselves to imagine. We have a magic wand. We can have everything we ever dream of. And what does that look like for us? And really to feel that in a very embodied sense. What do I look like? What is my surrounding? Who are the people around me? What am I doing on a daily basis? This kind of mental time travel. I think that really helps me get a sense of clarity of where I am now, kind of on this precipice of the future. And then also having overcome so much in my life, it gives me a sense of clarity. It gives me a sense of gratitude. And it also gives me that language that I need to kind of articulate what I want next. I think that's a really powerful place to stand in our lives.
That's beautiful. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to work on that. This is wonderful. Well, thank you. That was very generous of you. And I just, again, want to thank you for this time. I learned so much. I get more astonished every day when I meet people through Substack or Instagram and DMs. And here I am learning a bunch of things from you. I'm so glad that we connected on Substack, which I love. I do. I love the community.
Same.
People are nice and they're out there to learn. They're readers, they're writers, they're creatives. And it's just, there's such a good vibe into that community. I really love it there. So I'm just happy that I met you there.
I agree. I'm so grateful for this connection. Thank you for your time and for your wonderful questions.
Thank you so much. I will be in touch soon, and I hope we can meet in person very soon again.
That sounds lovely. Thanks, Patricia.
Thanks for listening to Wealthy, the Matriarch podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean so much to me if you shared this with someone. Make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and head to matriarch.com to stay connected. I'm your host, Patricia Asui Reed. Thank you so much for being here.